Hello and welcome to this presentation on motion capture and intangible cultural heritage in immersive virtual reality for education. This is John BABARA, and together with Jeremy Grech, I present you the work of our research team here at St. Martin's Institute of Higher Education in Hamrun, Malta. We will start with a brief theoretical background on realism in IVR that informs our work on the Relief History project, which was partially financed by the Malta Council for Science and Technology for and on behalf of the Foundation for Science and Technology through the Fusion R&I Research Excellence Program. In this project, we attempted to match the realism of tangible cultural heritage by using motion capture technology for the portrayal of intangible cultural heritage. An evaluation of the project is followed by some future directions we wish to take. For decades, VR has served cultural heritage by providing digital conservation and accessibility to remote or restricted cultural sites. However, there has been a recent call for the experiential aspect of cultural heritage, and this is often met with the provision of presence in terms of Slater's place illusion, being there. This is often provided by the visual and oral representation of tangible cultural heritage, that is, the physical site itself as well as the artifacts found within it, and by the 6 degrees of freedom afforded by the VR technology that provides sensorial immersion for the virtual visitor. However, it has been noted by Thompson that digital representations of cultural heritage lack believably realistic representations of the creators and inhabitants of these sites, the so-called cultural insiders, as well as limit visitors to a finite set of fixed points of view rather than providing freedom of navigation. Realistic representations of the cultural insiders would represent the human behavior in and around cultural sites using cultural artifacts, what UNESCO describes as intangible cultural heritage. For such behavior to be believable, it should give the illusion that what is apparently happening is really happening, what Slater calls plausibility illusion. However, this intangible cultural heritage, while it is behavior involving tangible artifacts within a tangible space, is itself impossible to manifest physically and needs to be seen in action, contextualized in its original environment, and so needs to portray functional realism. How do we measure such realism? Well, realism in the sense of truth is hard to measure within the context of prehistoric cultural heritage, where primary sources are minimal and weathered across the millennia, and secondary sources do not exist or are too ambiguous to provide some level of certainty. Secondly, the portrayal of realism also depends on technological limitations, such as display resolution and rendering performance degradation as detail increases. Furthermore, sensory realism is often limited to sight and hearing, and marginally haptics, with research still in its infancy with respect to smell and taste. ICOMOS, in its NARA document, presents authenticity as a measure of fidelity rather than accuracy. It is a subjective criterion whose judgment and consideration must be carried out relative to the heritage artifact's cultural content. Informed by all this, let us now look at our project, the Relief History Project, which aimed to help history educators present prehistoric cultural heritage using VR technology. In view of our international audience, let us help situate the project. We are at the southern tip of Europe, on the island of Malta, in a site close to its natural harbour, discovered underneath residential housing in the 1900s, lies the UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Hal Saflieni Prehistoric Hypogeum, whose 3 levels were excavated across hundreds of years between 4000 and 1500 BC. The site, under the curation of Heritage Malta, is accessible through a walkway with a limited number of visitors allowed per hour, in order to maintain its microclimate in check, as it houses unique red ochre paintings from the Neolithic era. Our VR experience is based on a LiDAR scan of the site commissioned by Heritage Malta during renovation works in the late 2000s. This provided a highly realistic benchmark against which to match our efforts. To start with, we worked on implementing realistic lighting and shadows, using the high-definition rendering pipeline and physically based rendering textures provided by Unity 2021. Here you can see the before and after of using such a rendering pipeline, and here are some screenshots taken on the inside and the outside. The free navigation system implemented by Jeremy really allows one to explore and wander around the site's haunting depths. To recreate believably realistic character behavior that delivers authentic intangible cultural heritage matching the realism of the site's representation, we used motion capture suits, specifically the Rococo Smart Suit Pro 2, including smart gloves. We provided a portrayal of the digging behavior of its creators using 3D models of stone and bone tool artifacts found on site and informed by archaeological research on the site's tool marks. Given the complexity of the site, capturing animations using just the mocap suit using traditional techniques would require a lot of back and forth with respect to recording animations, placing them into the scene, and then checking to see if they would work. We thus decided to give the actor some context of the virtual world that he would be controlling by wearing the VR headset while performing the behavior, helping him situate himself in the working environment. This in turn meant that we had to create a separate system for the director that would connect with the actor's virtual environment so that choreography instructions could be delivered within that same virtual space. Here we see the physical studio setup with props for the actor to dig into, and the virtual studio, with the director here seen as a robotic avatar indicating the area to be dug up using a laser pointer. The resulting animation fit well within the dark environment lit up by torchlight, casting shadows, and portraying realistic digging behavior in the hypogeum. We launched this experience at the Digital Technology Expo here in Malta last weekend, and we had a constant queue lining up to try out the experience, receiving very positive and encouraging feedback from adults and youngsters alike. With respect to evaluation, we first had the heritage experts review an advanced prototype of the system, giving us feedback on the appearance of the character, the artifacts used for housing the firelight, and the enacted character behavior. We then invited history educators, heads of Department of History, and education officers to evaluate our virtual experience in terms of authenticity towards the site itself, for those who had visited the site, and towards the physical place in general. We see here the results on a Likert scale, with the white and grey columns belonging to those who had visited the site, and the second white-blue columns representing those who had not visited the hypogeum, but had visited other Neolithic sites on the island. Visitors to the site scored the overall and visual authenticity, particularly the lighting and textures, higher than those who had not visited it, except for audio, which was not an aspect addressed in this project. The authenticity of the character suffered a bit, as explained in the focus group discussion, not due to the behavior, but because of his appearance. He was seen to be too young for his age and maybe too robust and exceptionally fit. The overall positive feedback encouraged us to take this project further, by maybe adding more character behaviors, such as the painting of the red ochre spirals on the site's walls and ceilings, focusing on the oral representation of the site's highly echoic chambers, but more urgently on how to make this experience accessible to schools, perhaps through lightweight variations that can be experienced on one's mobile device. Thank you for your attention, and we hope this presentation did justice to the work we have done, more on which you can read in our paper in the conference proceedings. We would be happy to answer any questions you may have, addressed to our email addresses shown here. On behalf of Jeremy and the rest of the creative research team here at St. Martin's, we thank you once again.